There is always one athlete in any sport who stands out from the rest, not just in his own era but across the history of that sport as a whole. Today we have a cyclist who is truly one of a kind, and we're gonna tell you all about him right now, right here on Cycling Right Now, so make sure you don't miss it and subscribe to our channel right away. We should investigate this. There is a consensus that Belgian professional cyclist Eddy Merckx was the best ever. He had an impressive amateur and professional career, winning the Tour de France 5 times, the Giro d'Italia 5 times, and the Vuelta a Espana once. He also won every major classic at least twice, finishing with 19 classic victories in total. He won the title of world champion 3 times, set a new hour record, and dominated the sport like no one before. Eddy Merckx was born Edouard Louis Joseph, Baron Merckx, on 17th June 1945 in Meensel-Kiezegem, Belgium. Merckx's upbringing was relatively affluent compared to that of other cycling greats of the time. Eddy Merckx had more options than his contemporaries, who, like him, turned to cycling to supplement their meager incomes. His loved ones probably would have been happier if he had taken a more conventional middle-class job. On the other hand, Merckx saw no value in this. His interest was piqued by bicycle racing, and after he impressed his mother by dominating in a number of amateur competitions, she encouraged him to pursue a career as a professional cyclist. In 1964, Merckx reached the pinnacle of his amateur career by claiming the title of world champion. There was no assurance that a talented amateur would ever make it to the pros. As time went on, many once great amateurs, world champions, fell from prominence. In 1965, Merckx signed his first professional contract with Solo Superior, where he raced for the Emperor Rik van Looy. Merckx described the experience as a baptism of fire, saying that he received no help from seasoned veterans. His performance at Peugeot earned him a transfer to the FAME team in Italy in 1968. On his first try, he won the Giro in 1968 thanks to the support of the Italian team. It's easy to look at historical figures like Merckx through rose-colored glasses. It's hard to believe that, when he was at the top of his game, he was frequently disliked by the public. The public had grown weary of the unstoppable winning machine that was Merckx, especially in France. Decades later, Lance Armstrong would get the same reaction. Merckx's suspension was often inadequate, leaving him with few opportunities to show his talents. The tour organizers didn't make Merckx feel welcome in 1973. And he had his sights set on the Vuelta instead. When Merckx was punched in the kidneys at the 1975 Tour de France's mountaintop finish, public outcry reached a fever pitch. This was Merckx's first Grand Tour defeat since 1969. Thevenet would likely have won regardless of whether or not he was punched, but Merckx's punch to the kidneys caused him serious health problems, not that he would have complained. Though it may come as a surprise, people tend to favor winners, especially those who don't always win or who only win by the narrowest of margins. In contrast, Merckx cared about things other than money. He had made a good living off of racing, but no one could accuse him of doing it for the 30 pieces of silver. It was Merckx's deepest desire to triumph triumphantly. For his devoted followers, he constantly sought out novel approaches. He was always striving to be victorious. The only way to truly succeed at being a champion is to give it your all, as the saying goes. This phrase is thrown around carelessly in today's training manuals, but after reading about Merckx's life, you'll begin to understand what it means to devote one's life to a single overarching interest. Merckx was a cycling fanatic who lived and breathed the sport. In races, nothing else mattered to him but coming in first. The actions of his competitors occupied his mind constantly. He carried an assortment of spare parts for his bike, including several frames, stems, and bars of varying sizes, and tinkered with it constantly. Nothing was too minor for Merckx to notice. To cut down on bulk, he'd hand-drilled his own components. In his garage, he kept over 200 extra tubular, aging to improve puncture protection. In terms of time spent training and competing, Merckx was unrivaled. Merckx appeared unfazed by the worst of the weather, while we were all reaching for our turbos. Nevertheless, why did everyone think Merckx was the best cyclist ever? 7 of those Tour de France victories belonged to Lance Armstrong. Later, all victories were taken away for drug use. 5-time Tour de France winners include names like Anquetil, Hinault, and Indurain. However, it is important to keep in mind that the Tour de France is not the only race in the world of cycling, despite what the modern media may lead the uninitiated to believe. It's just as important, if not more so, to the Belgians and the Flemings in particular, to win the classic races as it is to win the Tour. As an additional point, the Giro and Vuelta were almost as prestigious as the Tour de France in the 1970s. Throughout his career, Merckx was victorious at every turn. His season of dominance among the great classic one-day races would begin in the spring. Stage races followed, including Paris-Nice, Grand Tours, the World Championships and the late-season classics, all of which Merckx routinely won. Masters of the classics like Van Looy and Sean Kelly are the true greats of cycling. Examples include Mark Cavendish and Alessandro Petacci, two great cyclists who have won multiple Grand Tour sprint stages, or great cyclists like Lance Armstrong and Miguel Indurain won the Tour de France. Other exceptional cyclists focus on the hour-long time trial and have set new world records in this event. Aubrey, Boardman and others. Merckx was the sole provider. He dominated the Grand Tours, the stages of tours and the classics and minor tours. It was an hour record that he smashed. 3 times he won the World Championship. The final score and riding technique. You can learn a lot about how to win the Tour de France by observing past champions. Merckx, however, never took a defensive stance in his early years as a cyclist. In the middle of stages, just before the final sprint, he would launch his attacks. Sometimes he'd even enter himself in a sprinting competition. He won the coveted yellow jersey, mountain classification and points all in the same year, 1969. Pro cycling requires a great deal of strategic planning, as the sport is all about saving strength for crucial moments. That just wasn't Merckx's mode of operation. To put it simply, he attacked whenever the mood struck him. He received a huge confidence boost from his unconventional racing strategy. The amazing thing about Merckx was his durability. While his competitors like Louis O'Connor had tremendous talent but also a tendency to fold under pressure, his energy levels never seemed to flag over several years. It has been said that Merckx's accomplishment will never be equal again. In today's era of sprint trains, it's hard to fathom a yellow jersey attacking with a kilometer to go on the stage. Although the Giro and the Sprint Classics have been won, it is difficult to imagine a cyclist being able to dominate the Tour de France. Merckx was much more than just a cyclist. While the world of professional cycling may appear glamorous at first glance, the reality of racing up to 250 days per year in all conditions is anything but. In bad weather, Merckx accomplished much of his greatest work. His final Tour de France, however, encapsulated Merckx's approach to the sport as a whole. Merckx had his flaws, and he was subject to some debate. In particular, the pain of the failed dope test at the Giro in 1969 nearly drove him to retirement. When considering Merckx's entire life and career, however, it's impossible to avoid the conclusion that he was a true champion without precedent. He faced fiercely but honestly. Though he may have been doggedly focused on victory, he never resorted to dishonest means to achieve it. Merckx did not race to increase his wealth. For the sake of public athletic accomplishment, he raced. In his determination to improve the sport, Merckx raised cycling's profile and status to new heights. Not only did he raise the bar for cyclists everywhere, but athletes everywhere. As Merckx always raced honestly. Think you should also subscribe to our channel honestly, because watching videos without subscribing to the channel is also a crime.